IPPS-A leads the way. IPPS-A. One system, personnel, and pay. IPPS-A. 21st century.
Welcome to another episode of the IPPS-A podcast. Today we have two illustrious guests. In fact, I'm really excited to introduce the two gentlemen that we have on today. You know, one is Colonel Marcus Motley. He's the commandant of the AG Schoolhouse. The other is Colonel Daryl Morse, who's, we'll get into it, but, you know, his position's called the Tickum. He's supposed to be like a future guy. He's always thinking about what we need to do next in the AG school and where we're going as an HR core. But today's podcast is really all about IPPS-A and what we're doing at the schoolhouse and how do we prepare soldiers and really just the way ahead as we look at training and how do we educate and train the force to utilize this awesome capability that we have with IPPS-A. So again, I think this is going to be a really good session. So let's just jump right into it, kick it off. Marcus, I'll throw it over to you. Maybe introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
So I'm Marcus Motley. I'm the 35th Commandant of the Adjutant General School, AG, and by profession, started out as an artilleryman. And I love what I do because we get to serve soldiers, families, and civilians every day, all day. Steady state crisis, contingency. People business is what we do. And so I have a tremendous appreciation for the institutional Army now that I am here, having been operational for so long. And I just look forward to talking about some of the things that we're doing here at the schoolhouse.
Yeah, there's been 35 commandants?
35 of them. Some have repeated purposely. And so maybe it's 32 or 33. I don't know. I got to go check.
Well, maybe we'll just extend you for like multiple years so you can count as the 35th and the 36th.
35th-ish, right?
Yeah, 35th-ish.
35.5.
Awesome. So Daryl, what about you, man? What are you doing at the schoolhouse? You know, two colonels. I know you got a slightly different job than what Marcus has as the commandant.
Yeah, so I'm Daryl Morse. I'm the first director of what we now call the TRADOC Proponent Office Human Resources, and that's a long title. I think we're on our fourth name change so far. And what we do, we're a very small team, but as you said in the beginning, we're looking at future in regards to the full spectrum of operations, specifically regarding the HR community. But what I do for IPPS-A is I like to think that we're the integrators of IPPS-A, from your team up at G1FMD and the project manager inside the schoolhouse, to help facilitate the products, to kind of develop that institutional training for the force, to at least get us started. And so again, yeah, we're looking at a lot of different things, but in the IPPS-A spectrum, that's probably, I'd say, a good 75-80% of our job is just trying to, as I mentioned, bring it inside the schoolhouse for integration purposes. We're excited to do it. I mean, I will say, I kind of up front, I was a little cautious. I mean, I've been hearing about IPPS-A since about 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
But I will say I think it's come a long way in a very short time, even from when I got here in the summer of 2018. Now 2.5 years later, I mean, it's coming full circle in the fact that we're already seeing the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the active component, in addition to what the National Guard has gotten already. So I mean, again, I'd say we've gone a long way, and I'm excited to see where this is going to go in the near term as well as the future.
You know, you're down in South Carolina while the program kind of sits with our PM and our integrator in the DC area. And then we have a connection out to HRC2, a team there that's focused in on systems, but we're all kind of connected, based on kind of everything you said, rolling out institutional training and then ensuring that it's, we're educating the force as we go. Daryl, I want to jump on just you said when you heard about it in 2014, maybe we could just talk a little bit about part of this IPPS-A journey, and then some of the pitfalls or obstacles we've had to overcome to get to this point where we've had some pretty good success over the last couple of years.
Colonel Johnson, you're not going to talk about the D word, are you?
Oh, say it. Come on,
Wow.
somebody say it.
You went right there, Marcus. Right there. Dimers. There you go.
Oh,
what's
not
that?
the D word.
Wow. Wow.
He went there. I had flashbacks to 2010, sitting in the auditorium of the AG schoolhouse at 6 a.m, listening to a Dimers in brief, looking around like, what is this Dimers thing? What is everybody talking about?
It was probably earlier than that, though, Daryl. That was probably like 2004 or something.
Oh, I don't know. Well, no, well, I was transitioning because, like Marcus said in the beginning, I also didn't start in the AG community. I'm a former logistician, and I was transitioning over to the AG community at a course here. And I remember they pulled us all in again at 6 a.m. to listen to a Dimers pitch. And I think to a lot of the folks in the room at the time, the AG type, those who kind of were born into the community, it was something they were somewhat familiar with. But for the rest of us, it was very tough to wrap our heads around. And you were saying, Greg, like a minute ago, talking about 2014 when I said I first heard about it. And I think in some ways it was a similar approach. I was in Southern Command in Florida, standing in the middle of my strength management shop, and talking to our Army desk. Well, there's this IPPS-A coming out. Well, what is it?
Yeah.
And we used the D word. We said, well, we think this is the new Dimers, just Dimers Light, maybe, where it was very Army focused to get aligned with whether it was AFNet, the Air Force Net, or Marine Net. That was the perspective back then. It was like the Army's version of these other HR tools that were out there.
Yeah, I'll just say shame on you, Daryl. Just shame. But the Dimers thing, it's funny. I mean, we're joking about it, but so for those that are listening, if you don't already know, right, Dimers was the big project that was DoD wide. It wasn't just the Army; it was every service get into an HR and pay system, and it essentially imploded on itself in the 2007 2008 time period. So at that point, the whole program was discontinued. So in essence, it was a bit of a failure because it didn't come to fruition. We did not modernize our HR and pay in 2007 and 8, and in fact, we're still kind of dealing with the same legacy architecture today as we had during that Dimers ramp up.
But we like failure. We like failure. Failure in this case could be good,
Yeah, no, I think that's an awesome way to look at it because we did learn a tremendous amount from Dimers. So again, the I think just for folks listening, the timeline was then the Army essentially said, hey, we don't want that to go to waste, all that work in Dimers. We want to create our own program and get all three components into one system and do, personnel pay and then talent management stuff. And so, the Army picked up where Dimers dropped off, but, for about 4 or 5 years, it went in circles on requirements. And then you really got serious a little bit after when Daryl, figured out what IPPS-A was, right? So in the 15-16 timeframe, we actually got, a PM and an integrator, and we started building, and then we delivered release 2 in 19, and the early part of 20 to the National Guard. So right now we're sitting at 330,000 users, all in the National Guard, and we are steadily marching towards release 3 go live for the active, the reserve. So we'll have 1 million soldiers in this thing by the end of this year, December 21.
But if I could, and I apologize, maybe I'm belaboring the point, but I do agree with the comment Marcus made about the failure is a good thing, because I think that's been a positive. That typically we look at failures as always bad, and it's not always the case. And the fact that we're not constrained by failure, that we see failure, you're going to get lessons out of everything. And in many ways, you could argue we're not where we are now if it wasn't for Dimers. So again, we talk about it and you hear it across the community, and the Army is like, oh, that was an ugly word. And maybe it was, but we wouldn't be where we are now, and the National Guard wouldn't be where they are now without that system having been existing previously. You could make, I would make that argument.
I totally agree, because we would not be where we are without dimers, and we'll probably say excited a myriad of times here. Probably have to count them, but just because it
I'm
failed,
always excited, Marcus. I'm always excited.
I'm excited, and so we learned a lot, and I think it's important to note that we won't repeat the failures of dimers. IPPS-A is new, and it will come to fruition in December 2021. And just the three lenses that I have, the Commandant, the Chief of the AG Corps, Chief Army Bands, I have these lenses that I look through, educator, trainer, and the component. And so as we begin to take on this task to implement across the DOTMO PF, particularly the doctrine of organization, training, and leader development, I'm excited to even get what I have, the several tools that we use to give it to the schoolhouse and the students. There's students leaving here today that have touched Release 2, and they're excited. And so we're creating that angst, the positive angst to what I hate to say, maybe some naysayers who are cynical, but we wish the cynics away, because we will, by our leadership, by our efforts, make this possible. We owe this to the Army, and it's coming.
And to add on to that, I think Marcus touches on, Marcus touched on a great point, because I think in many ways, IPPS-A is different than other systems that the Army has experienced or been fielded, because it's not a top-down driven approach, but it's a grassroots level, by the fact that soldiers coming through the institution, as Marcus said, that are touching it now, even if it is National Guard, they're going out to these units, these companies, these battalions, these brigades, and it's your privates, and it's your sergeants, and it's your lieutenants who are talking about it to their to their superiors and their leaders, versus the other way around that we've seen in other systems. Even GCSSA, what came out, rolled out when I was in battalion command in 2015, 2016, and it was a top-down approach, where IPPS-A is the exact opposite of that. And that, again, is also, again, like Marcus said, we're using the word exciting again, because we're touching these kids. That's really what they are, these young adults, these new folks to the Army, because they're the tech savvy, they're the tech smart, but they're the ones taking it to the unit and talking about it with their leaders. And that is so unique, I think, in a lot of Army systems we've seen.
Yeah, all great points, guys. I think there's a couple of distinct, I think, lessons we learned from dimers that we've used in IPPS-A as we've driven forward. So we took like that requirement stuff from dimers, and then morphed it a little bit and added things like, hey, we added mobile capability. You go move into the 21st century, you got to be mobile. We've tacked into the program disconnected ops. That won't come in Release 3, but that will come later. The talent management concept has been developing, and that's been added. Those are all differences from dimers. And then just the approach, like you're saying, Daryl. We started with the National Guard, and we really worked painstakingly to integrate key individuals from many different states and territories to help shape the functionality and how it will be used in the system. We did things like user juries, where we ran software through these stakeholders, and then altered or changed how it works in the system based on that feedback. And then obviously we're live in all 54 states and territories in the Guard. That's one of the biggest differences between us and dimers. We put it in the field. It's operating, but we've been able to upgrade a little bit in Release 2 as well. Obviously our General McConville, he was the G1 when I came on in 2016, and this was certainly his priority inside the HR realm. And it's continued to be a priority for these senior leaders. Now he's the chief. He's still pushing us to get this done, to modernize, our HR in the Army. So you have this senior leader kind of overarching, really just pushing us to get this done. And again, I guess I can't say out loud, the success we've had in release 2 enough. That's the biggest difference between us and dimers. And if there's naysayers out there, I mean, it's like you got to open your eyes and acknowledge that the Guard is 100% on IPPS-A, 300,000 soldiers, and when they get mobilized for things like the Capitol defense or COVID operations, or even deploying downrange, they're using IPPS-A to do all those things. And in fact, in COVID, we've just seen a tremendous outpouring of goodwill back from the Guard, saying, "Hey, we're really appreciative that we can get into IPPS-A from our houses, still operate, still do SRPs, still mobilize during this kind of COVID environment where people need to be, separated a little more." So, just really good news coming from them. I got to ask you guys though, because you probably see it more than I do. Marcus, I mean, what do you say to folks like lieutenants and junior NCOs, or that bring up dimers as they're rolling through the schoolhouse?
So it's not the lieutenants that brings up, unless they're ancient prior service. But for any of the naysayers, I basically tell them I'm going to get the database in about a month. I'll get release 3. We played with release 2. And so familiarization, IMT, PME, kind of get the release 2 familiarization rather in before they leave and graduate. So they have some reference point other than a PowerPoint slide. And they have that expectation. And so when we get release 3 and do the training and the development and the lesson plans, the POIs, and get our instructors up to speed and actually give it to the students. And this year, December, go live, but the schoolhouse gets the database in March. Where are the naysayers? Maybe they went to Mars today. I don't know.
and if I could add on to that also, that the naysayers in many ways get subsumed once they touch the system. So the conscious decision that Marcus is the commandant in the school here made to have everyone inside a course touch the system, i.e. using the user productivity kits, the training tools that are out there to push the button, has made a significant difference that we can see firsthand, whether they're a private, a sergeant, lieutenant, but even the civilians here, I'll say within the bubble that's Fort Jackson, our installation, our IMCOM, Installation Management Command people are getting the chance to touch it too. And they've had a longer career than maybe some of us have, but that's okay because they're getting that opportunity to touch it as well, and actually using air quotations play inside the system. What we've seen, that's made a big difference in bringing people around to understand its capabilities.
I know there's some complexity to so I don't want to belittle or discount the effort that it takes to do the releases and actually the new equipment training and all the things associated with rolling this out. But we're finding by doing the familiarization that the system is intuitive. And so for all the training that we think we need, or the understanding, this is a techie generation who can glean from release 2 to go to release 3. And so I think the learning curve, if we can reduce the anxiety with the familiarization, the learning curve won't be as steep as we think it is. That's my hope here in the schoolhouse.
As we looked at the Guard, I think the people who had the most concern or anxiety were those that really understood SIDPERS the best, right? So if you'd been working in the National Guard on their SIDPERS system, for 10 years, you know it, in the back of your head. You could do it with your eyes closed, and it's just really become easy for you to use. it's really that population that I think had the hardest time jumping into IPS, but it's played out. So folks, at this point know after IPS has been up for essentially 2 years, they understand IPS now, so they're able to work it and make it sing. A lot less anxiety from the folks that were never exposed to supers. As you just jump in and you learn the system and you go. Um, yeah, so I think there's a lot to that, and then it's good to hear that from what you guys are seeing, it's fairly intuitive. I mean, if you go download the app, right, and you put it on your phone, you get in to look at your profile. That's all really easy to do. And in release 3, you're going to do your leaf form the same way. Me, you, and Daryl will get in off of our phones and do our leaf forms routed through our supervisors, and then that's how you're going to get your leaf form approved.
Yeah, and to
we,
add
we
on to that, I think we all have seen when we speak on IPS-A to groups wherever they may be, that point right there attracts attention and attracts interest. That we tell them you can literally be sitting on your couch at your house and submit a leave form, an absence, and you can watch it go through and you can watch it hit the workflow, and you can see it has your platoon sergeant, has your first sergeant, wherever your workflow may be. You can watch it through the process, and that gains soldiers' attention because now they're invested in the process, and it's no longer, okay, did it clear the platoon sergeant's desk? Let me go chase down whoever it is. They're actually, the fact that they can pull up, like you say, Greg, pull up their phone and watch that process, it gains so much attention and so much buy-in from users and soldiers to see that they're invested in the program.
Hey, Greg. Also, to your point, you made me think about when you talked about the National Guard rolling it out in the National Guard first. One of the questions I get here, as we do PMEs, is that some of my classes are 40 to 50% Compo 2 or 3 at any given time. And so we finally here have, we talk about excitement, that one system of record, the one record per soldier, that one environment where we can see the entire force, the total force, active reserve, National Guard, the total force. And so the question I always get is, how do I address in the POI, my curriculum, the 54 plus state and territory differences when each state or territory does something different? And I think IPS-A will save us that pain in the future. We'll finally have this one system. The A in IPS is Army, so that's awesome. Total Army, basically.
Yeah, I mean, our journey through the Guard was faced with that. I mean, honestly, it goes back to another big difference between Dimers and IPS-A. We started with the Guard, who in many cases was um, a little more difficult than the active duty. The active duty essentially, hey, here's your process active duty. You're gonna follow the reg. The Guard, right? 54 different ways to do certain things, and so we work through standardizing, those processes, and now you got IPS-A, and for the most part, right, those processes are being followed. I mean, so that in itself was difficult to navigate. These 54 entities. But yeah, I think I'll say it's exciting because you're also going to be able to add for active duty people in your school, right? You're going to be able to show and talk about, hey, this is how this plays out in the National Guard or the Reserves. How does a soldier mob from the Reserves or the Guard? How does one transition from the active duty to the reserves, right? You can start to build that into your curricula, whereas you may not have been talking about that, in the past, because there's such different systems and real manual ways to do a lot of that. As we continue to march forward, get release 3 out, head towards release 4, you're really just streamlining how we go back and forth between all 3 components.
And that also eases, if if I can add on to that, it adds to the teaching aspect of it, because with the rollout of IPPS-A, the fielding to the active component, the reserve component, you're not having to caveat a lot of your statements within the schoolhouse. Well, if I'm teaching you email PO, oh, by the way, Compo 2, Compo 3, you use a different system. It's all one system. You're not constantly having to go back and make that comment or make that statement. And it sounds trivial in a sense, but it's so true. There's credibility behind it, because again, you're speaking to one system that every single soldier in that classroom, that student in that classroom, is all going to come from a common place, versus SIDPERS or RLAS or email PO and the active. So that right there is, I think, a big piece within the institutional training platform.
And so what you both just articulated is my ability to have these standardized lesson plans that are not compo discriminating.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to say it. I mean, we're able to get to this kind of total force approach. Again, we just have never been able to really do that when you have so many differences in systems and business processes, and then I mean, you hear me talk a lot about data, right? The data is just all over the place based on different systems and different components. So again, pretty cool.
And if I can touch on a point that this is going to sound like it's a frustration, and actually it's not. It's actually a good thing. Is that with the National Guard fielding and seeing those constant requests for information, those constant updates to the system, the schoolhouse here, we're constantly trying to stay aligned with the process and the system. And in many ways, we can't, because it's maturing and it's adapting so quickly. And in other venues, that could be seen as negative, but actually it's very much a positive, because the system is constantly adapting from soldier level input. I go back to my comment I made a while back about the GCSSA system. How many Army systems do we know that are being truly affected by the user level, the soldier, by their input? I mean, as something simple as a Facebook comment on the IPPS-A team, you're seeing soon after an actual change inside the system. That's tremendous. I mean, that's tremendous for a soldier to see their input actually affect change and make changes. And again, so it seems negative to us, but it's truly a positive.
Yeah, you're close enough to kind of see that play out, Daryl. I mean, a lot of folks probably listening don't necessarily kind of understand how that's working, or even happening, just because they're not necessarily using, right, they're not in the Guard. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple things we instituted really early on. One was we used a closed Facebook group. Here you go. Social media can be positive in a lot of regards. And we asked folks to tell us what they were seeing in the system. And then over time, what's happened with that group is several thousand, kind of super users in the National Guard. People will come in and ask a question, and then right, guardsmen will just answer it, which is awesome, right? It's like change management happening right in front of us. But then where something's being noted that, hey, the system's acting funky here, we've used that to then drive what we call a defect. And then we've worked to fix that or upgrade that in the system. One other way you can do a formal, we call it CRM. We have a piece of software in IPPS-A called the Customer Relations Module. You as a user can put in a ticket that says, hey, this is funky, this is not working. And then that gets routed to my sustainment team, who then works through that and then puts it in order to be fixed. So the first year of IPPS-A in all of 19, we were doing pushes of upgrades, or in some cases defect fixes, almost every week. And really that helped us stabilize and then improve the system to what the users were asking for or needing. But we're pushing updates very frequently to get after your point.
Yeah, and I think it kind of, maybe I'm not really changing subjects, but I think the other effect that IPPS-A is having inside the schoolhouse and actually across the entire forces is causing a culture change that we try to ensure that we address inside the schoolhouse, but across the Army, is that no longer are your adjutant generals / human resource personnel, whether military or civilian, purely transactional. They are now shifting to becoming analytical, because the capabilities and the system processes is significantly more than we've seen before. And it's not just going to help in terms of processing an administrative request, but it's going to help commanders and leaders. But suddenly here's a new quantity they probably never had in their planning processes and how they're going to do their business, whether it's through large-scale combat operations or defense support to the U.S., whatever the case may be. It's a truly analytical tool that I don't think we've seen before.
Hey, Marcus, I'm chewing on what Daryl just said.
Wait, I mean, that was pretty significant. I got to unpack that in my mind. So, I mean, we're going from transactional to transformational. You wrote down my thing before. I think I need to write that one down. That's pretty neat there, Daryl.
That was my one pithy comment for this session.
That's pretty good.
That's an OER cut and paste bullet right there.
But I mean, again, I'm just pausing for a second, maybe trying to get my words together here. I can't top that. But when you say transactional, that's what, creating a rating scheme. You're doing a task.
Yes. That's I think for many years that's what we as an entity have done, or we as a community have done inside our schoolhouses, is that we haven't necessarily constrained our community, but we've said to them, these are the administrative functions we expect you to provide to commanders and organizations, which is valid, and I'm not discounting that. But IPPS-A changes that dynamic. Go ahead.
I could dumb it down maybe, because the way I hear you too, I think that's phenomenal. But we will no longer be labeled the paper pushers.
Yes.
You talk data. We will be able to not just push the paperwork, submit the request, but there's the data analytics behind it. We'll be able to interpret it, and we'll be able to understand it and articulate it, and leap forward and be able to predict and project things about it. And I think that's what you're also describing is that effect, right, Daryl?
Yeah, and yes, completely. You explained it far better than I could, because I think that's something that's been missing from a simple operational planning process, is that now our S1s and our G1s will have a seat at the table, because the program will allow them to provide their commanders with analytical data and impacts by doing by selecting a course of action. There are impacts, and this system will help a commander understand the impacts of the decisions they make.
And guess what? They will have more time to think about the analytics, because all these subsystems, we won't need to have all these passwords for EDAS and TOPIS and COPS, because it'll be just one system. All these systems are combined, and so it saves time and resources, so we can think more. There's no even a time lag between data and databases and depicting, and then you can see the total force in this same. And so now you can spend more time thinking through what your commander's priorities, how you complement and support and inform the commander's decision points against his or her priorities.
And you hear the Army, we talk about the enterprise level for the Army. We talk about readiness, modernization, reform as some of our main three components as we move forward to the future of the Army. That in many ways gets after it lends itself towards the modernization portion of that triad. IPPS-A becomes a key piece of that through the tool that it can provide commanders, but also the S1s and the Army as a whole. That's a key component of as I said, of that triad.
Hey, Daryl, also, you made me think about the classroom experience. And so you remember, and Greg, you probably remember too, sir, the classroom experience, going to one room for this database, another room for that database. But that will no longer happen anymore. And so the implications behind that, Daryl, are pretty significant.
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing of the time now that's saved, is you're saying, is you're no longer shifting between 4 or 5 systems in the course of a training period. It's all one, and it's the time that's now saved to provide our students to reinforce that learning with more time is tremendous.
I'm still not off of your business analyst type comment, analytical, versus, transactional. I'm still stuck there, Daryl and Marcus.
Yeah, from transactional to transformational. Did I say it right, Daryl?
Yeah, yeah, and analytical and transformational, I think in this respect are very synonymous in that, because analytical you can say is a point in time, but you're right, transformational is even better because it takes it for a longer term period than just 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It's truly a game changer and a service changer that I think we truly haven't understood the capabilities are out there. We've only hit the top of the iceberg, so to speak.
And I can tell you, we're taking that on here at the schoolhouse. We have some partnerships with um, collegiate programs, and that we're pursuing and developing, and we're redefining what, and I really prefer to call them HR estimates. How we get after it is the analytics, the business analytics, the AI, the machine learning. They got this thing called cognitive analysis. This is pretty deep. But if we can explain what we want out of HR estimates, if it's the replacement operations estimate, the casualty estimate, now we can now predict. What if we can now predict what happens in 21 days left of some incident? And I think that's what we're trying to get to when you talk about the analytics, the predictive, descriptive, or cognitive analytics that now enables the commander to not just look linearly, is that a word, linearly, against the chart. They're tired of charts and slides, but what does the data mean? And that's I think where we will you make good use of the IPPS-A tool. We probably heretofore have had big data, but it was an export from some old database that we didn't understand. And so 50 different S1s interpreting 50 different ways of data to hopefully scratch the itch of a commander who needs to make a decision but doesn't have time to make sense of it. He needs the courses of action, the options presented to him or her. And I think the ones will be in a good position to do that with where we're going with the analytics and the database, the capability of the data that's going to be in there.
And also, the system IPPS-A allows the S1s and the G1s in the Army to become even a more of a key player within the sustainment nexus. And what I mean by that is the suite of sustainment, what we used to call logistics tools that are out there, because IPPS-A down the road is going to integrate with those and provide data to back and forth, feeding in and feeding out of these other systems. So no longer are we sitting in a bubble that maybe we have been in our past systems. This takes us to that next step towards convergence that's bringing it, as I say, within that larger sustainment nexus.
Yeah, we're pretty close
Yeah.
because you guys know about the COPS. I'm excited. That's another footstone for excited. I'm excited because, I'm not going to name a particular COP, but we have these automated COPs that feed, that you can put your system, IPPS-A can feed into and then help depict things. So if I wanted the casualty or the strength data to be depicted in this COP over a map overlay, for instance, IPPS-A will help streamline that, but make the data more real. And then as the ones are able to make sense of that over time, over space, over distance, I think that is a multiplier for an estimate, if you will, in the common operating picture environment, in the DOC, the TOC, the JDOC, or whatever it is, wherever the commander operates out of.
Hey, Daryl, you guys are throwing down a lot and look, maybe I talk just for a second on baselines in IPPS-A to maybe connect for the listeners how all this becomes more reality that you're talking. So IPPS-A, just real quick, right? You're going to do workflow and actions in IPPS-A, so it's automated. So you're going to get in and do what you use today you call a 4187 or an awards request, a leave form. You're going to do all that in IPPS-A. The S1 helps build the routing of those actions to the approval authority and then manages the workflow inside the system. So then again, if something's sitting in the commander's queue for approval for 2 weeks, right, the S1 will be able to see that and you can run stats off of those actions. You're not anymore running around with blue folders trying to figure out where the action is. Or on a flip side, someone can't just say the S1 has it because you can look in the system and go, actually, company commander, you have it, and you've had it for 17 days. So all of that's happening in IPPS-A. Your assignment orders, PCS orders, that's all done in IPPS-A. So then as you're moving from spot to spot, what we traditionally call strength management, all of that's in IPPS-A. So if you're a G1, a brigade S1, you're seeing your inbounds, you're seeing your outbounds, and then you're slotting people into positions. And there's a nifty slotting tool that if a division G1 is going to divert somebody, they can do that in the system and you can track that. So all of that
sponsorship's coming too. That's coming too, right?
Right. It's coming. And so all of that is in the system. And I think, as I listen to you guys talk, obviously you're talking estimates that are all tied to our wartime mission. But just even bringing it back to the transactional to the analyst, it's like you have to understand the system, how the data's coming into the system, and then if there's issues, how to solve those issues in the system. That takes some thinking. That takes some education and training, and to really make that thing sing. So you're not just taking the blue folder to the SAR major. That's transactional task. You're making this system sing and telling folks, hey, where those actions are in the systems through some analytics. With all that being said, though, guys, what are you doing to the curricula there at the schoolhouse to prep our 42s to do this?
So
Don't be shy now, Daryl.
Oh, I was going to say, I apologize, Marcus. I'm going to jump in and you slap me around. That's okay. It's a significant change because for so many years we've been really just adapting what's already out there in terms of our lesson plans and programs of instruction within the side the schoolhouse. So suddenly now, in many ways, you have to start from the beginning, and it's scary to a degree how you're going to do that, but it forces everyone in a good way to go back to the basics and understand what does our craft really mean and how do we do the things we do to translate that into providing students, again, whether they're enlisted, warrants, NCOs, officers, the best possible training that can be provided here before they go out to the force.
So one of the first steps after we get that the database that we're gonna develop lesson plans and POIs about in the curriculum basically is we're gonna remove the legacy content, and so we're gonna basically change the culture institutionally through the lesson plans, and we're not gonna look back. And so we're gonna help this, support, emphasize, reinforce the process, the analytics that you just talked about, Greg. We will incorporate that into the mindset going forward to then develop these lesson plans for IPPS-A, IMT, PMEs, and then get after the rollout of IPPS-A with people who are operationally minded, analytical, that understand the capabilities of the system, and then can maximize that experience for their commanders. and everybody we support, the soldiers, the families, and the civilians. I always say the 3 and the 5 make up stuff every day, but the 1 does real work, whether in steady state, crisis. We're always doing stuff every day. We have real world actions on our mind every day. And
your car's in the parking lot last usually, right?
Yeah.
As a G1 or an S1.
But it also it creates. We're telling or we're informing or letting our community know that we're going to expect more of them than maybe we've had in the past. And an example of what I mean by that is no longer a soldier just going to be a leave clerk, or are they no longer going to be that soldier running the TL from the S1 shop over to the DIMPO, because we're going to expect so much more of them because what they have is so much more. And that's a significant change. They're no longer a one-trick pony. That's, I think, the way I would look at it.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point, and a very important point. Like you have to, I think for the ones out there, SAR majors out there, right? You got to protect the HR clerk slash specialist, to have time in the system to run, oversight and to work, air reports, to do the slotting, to do the strength, to do the analytics. You gotta protect time to do that. But you're gonna gain time back to do more deep thinking, like you guys have been alluding. Like for instance, I don't think S1 shops really have enough time to do the marketplace, um, inside AIM right now, because of we haven't given them the tools to do all their work, and so they're running around trying to do as best they can, but they're really not able to focus on the analysis for their bosses. Hey, here's all the folks we should think about, versus the people we know, to drive marketplace to where the senior leaders want this to go. And one other comment, Marcus, I got the task. You want your institutional training database like now? Got it. Check.
Thanks, sir. Hey, can I just caveat? So I also don't want the listeners to think that because we will have more time savings, resource savings using IPPS-A, it does not mean that there's a reduction in personnel or manpower needed. I actually think we probably need more people because, for instance, if we are concerned about the CSA's top 3, some call them corrosive. I think he calls them corrosives. Suicide, sexual assault, sexual harassment, racism, extremism. And that is a portion, it falls in under our proponency realm, as command-in-chief programs. The 1 is a primary principal staff officer to make recommendations for the commander. So he or she now has the ability to see what the data depicts and points to, more time, if you will, more time to develop that estimate about the top 3 priorities or concerns that affect the Army. And who's thinking about that? So do you stovepipe it into several different entities, or the primary staff officer who has that data or access to the data or the trends, and all the other related things that affect a commander's climate or culture, at their fingertips? And I think that's, when we talk about having more time to think and free up things, I think we can spend more time on those things that ultimately enable the readiness of the unit, so that the commander, I want commanders to stay on the tank tables and the Bradley tables and artillery tables. And if the ones can embrace IPPS-A and the way we're going with analytics, and see how we can enable the fight, I think that would be tremendous. And I just see IPPS-A helping us to get there, as a platform. I don't think we, even as I'm talking, I don't think I truly understand the capability, but I see where we can get to on short order just by having the data and the capability.
Let me underline what you said up front on that, because I see it very, very much the same way. We're going to gain efficiencies in things like, hey, everybody sees the same thing in IPPS-A. right? You're not messing around with your higher headquarters debating over numbers. It's one number. It's an IPPS-A. That's the COP. What you see is what your headquarters see is what HRC sees. There's no hidden game on what's the real view. It is this is the view. You gain efficiency there, but I think it gives you time back to do some things we just can't get to today. One of the legacies of dimers, and this is really important, we lost 6,000 plus AG slots on the idea that dimers is going to give efficiency back to the AG core. We lost those positions. They've never come back, but we never put in place a system that got us the efficiencies. So we've already lost a tremendous amount of people that used to do HR. The system is now coming, and then there's other things that we've been asked to do. So you highlighted those big three that the Army has to attack, right? We've got to right the ship in several of those areas. Some of it's basic leadership, but how does the HR Corps tie into that? I think you articulated that very well, how we support the commander's intent to build cohesive teams, right? But the other is marketplace and talent management is no joke, right? The way that we are shaping how we want to do this in the Army is a task, and folks in the ones have to support commanders on how they recruit into their units, how they set folks up for future assignments, et cetera. That is a task, and I think that lands firmly in the AG Corps. And this is why I think this transition to analysts, right? Understanding how you work through that, how do you understand what you're seeing, how do you give recommendations to your boss, so she can make a very sound decision, versus the whatever gut decision. That all is going to take all of the manpower we got in the AG Corps, in my opinion.
So I see it the same way as the chief of the corps. That's one thing I'm working on, is to, if IPPS-A is the talent management tool, it's also the HR systems, but it's also the talent management tool, IPPS-A, then the 42 AG soldier manages the tool. Then we probably also manage the talent management program for the commander. And so there's a model out there for leader development, talent management, that we would interpret to set the priorities of the commander and then manage the talent within the system and the parameters of whatever guidance the commander gives. And I think that's important. I don't want to undersell that, but I think that's really, it's really important. And that, I think that's a mental leap now. But I can't think of any other staff entity that would do that other than the one. And so we need to train towards that, create that as an expectation, and then enable, through my curriculum, the training experience here, the education experience here, enable ones to do that.
In many ways, IPPS-A is an enabler. And what I mean by that is it enables to other capabilities that is not just purely the administrative baked into the IPPS-A system, that it's just purely a transaction or a personal action request, a PAR, moving from point to point. It's actually, again, getting after talent management. It's getting after analytics. It's getting after all those pieces, enabling those functions. The other piece I'd say is this is a game changer for the community, because we're gaining transparency to commanders and leaders, because as you said before, it's one system, it's one set of data. And by that transparency, that's creating credibility, because everyone's looking at it the exact same way. You don't have that ability to twist to fit to fit what you're looking for. The data is the data, and it helps with metrics. It helps with, again, just providing commanders and leaders that transparency, which leads to credibility for the community as a whole.
Yeah, totally. You got the second best quote of the night here. The enabler. IPPS-A is the enabler. The Army People Strategy actually says IPPS-A is the enabler of talent management. So even in our strategy documents, it says, hey, you can't get to this objective talent management system that the chief is pushing without IPPS-A coming along and shaping, how we're tracking talents, how we're interacting with the marketplace, tied to all of the other HR actions. And for me, and the whole data stuff, I mean, where I see this going is you have workflow that's traceable. You can actually now track how long an action takes. You can track every type of transaction. You can see what trends are happening across the Army with certain types of transactions. You can even tie that to commanders and units. All of that feeds into big data as you move forward. And I think we'll start to look at data differently in certain areas, like unit cohesion. What's the 10 to 15 variables that measure a unit's cohesion? Maybe one variable is pay transactions and accuracy. Maybe one variable is how long actions take to be approved. Let alone the marksmanship stats, medical readiness stats, command climate surveys, and then a measurement on the big three that Marcus talked about, the corrosive stuff. Maybe you tie all that together, and then that gets you a cohesion metric that we're using to help shape and guide leadership discussions, readiness, etc. I think you got to put a lot in place. You got to get things moving. You got to get IPPS-A moving. You got to have a workforce, right? An AG core that understands that analytical end state. And we've talked it. So to that end, I know we've talked about some data, curricula, and how do we get there? And Marcus, you talked a little bit about some of the stuff close to the schoolhouse. What are you guys chewing on, along that front, as we go forward?
Along what front, Greg?
Just data and building those analytics skills.
So we have working models and small working groups. There are already existing partnerships with collegiate institutions. There are examples. I'm trying to unpack it really. And I think data looks different at different echelons. And so, the discussions I have with Daryl all the time is who needs what when? Does a battalion need this, or does that reside more in a corps or an ASCC or HRC or Army G1? And so that's what we're trying to unpack. We are unpacking estimates. So I'm taking all of the estimates and going forward, I need to reverse engineer the expectation of what analytics should look like for a particular estimate. And so we've already sent students to a particular course to discuss analytics. And there's software already available short of IPPS-A to help articulate that. And so we're exploring that. And I'm hopeful that soon we will have some brainiacs, some analytic brainiacs that cannot just print off an Excel. The worst S1 I was when I could just press print and not sort the data or articulate the data, and the columns were off. And we're so far beyond that. We're so far beyond that already. And then IPPS-A and the data in there and the ease of use will make us so much better in giving the commander. That's what we owe. We owe the commander options. They can do whatever they want to do, but we have to give them the right options with the data we have. And I think IPPS-A, as you talked, it is an enabler to give the commander the right options because we have the right data. And so Daryl can talk some other things. We talked offline. You can tell him whatever you want to tell him, Daryl, but
what I was going to say in addition is it's more than just here inside the schoolhouse or the Army as a whole, because there are groups of people, and I know, Greg, you've got some of them, and we have some down here as well. They're looking at the civilian community and what they're doing in regards to whether you call it HR analytics or people analytics. What is the workforce doing that can translate over to what we're doing? Because there's a lot of great processes that are out there and translating. Now, some are going to apply to IPPS-A and others won't, and that's okay because we can use them outside of the system to get after that. But again, it goes back to the comment Marcus made, is giving the commander options. And so that's what analytics. We're going to have a problem, and this is a good problem to have, is that the amount of data that's out there is just tremendous. And it's knowing and necking it down to the right level, as Marcus said before, the right level of data for the right person. We have a lot of smart people, especially in our warrant officer cohorts that are out there, that are really good at this kind of stuff in terms of the data. And so it's just putting parameters around it somehow to establish the right, as I say, the right level of data at the right organizational structure is probably more the problem we're going to have, and that's a good problem to have.
I think we don't know what we don't know yet, and that's why I'm excited. I think if a data point, if what does it do if I change a data point from A to B? If I move something to the left 2 days versus push it out 2 days, what does that do to the morale or of the organization? I think that's what we can get to, and so the models that we've designed, we've gleaned things from the civilian world, enterprises, if you will, and created models to help us get there. And we've reached out to, as Daryl mentioned, the warrant officer cohort, because we think that that's definitely an entry point. But just so separately, the skill set to manage and derive the data versus the mindset that an expectation that we want an analytical mindset. And I think those are two different things. I think all 42s need to have the mindset that we're analytical and expect that. But maybe certain people are more master gunnerish for analytics than others. And that's what we're working through.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because you don't want to scare people if they don't have this, innate analytic capability, or that doesn't fully interest them. There's probably a spectrum here, right?
Yeah, but one example though already is that, I mean, you're using them in Crystal City, is the TWI is a tremendous experience to glean and then bring back examples. You're actually doing that today. You have TWI soldiers that go get business experience and bring back things that exponentially add value to what we're not training already in the Army. And we can't even articulate that yet. We don't know the ROI on that just yet.
But I mean, our I guess feedback is we've had tremendous localized ROI, right? Because they've seen how some of these big companies work, like Wells Fargo and UPS and United Airlines. We've had folks that essentially did an internship through the TWI program, and then they've come back to the program and then helped us, shape how we're building out analytics, CRM, a couple other areas that are really key for us. And honestly, it's also provided us some good touch points in those companies of folks that are running HR analytics for big companies. You find interesting things out, like United Airlines is using Palantir almost the same way that the Army is. And it's, I think, helped our team big time. And, I'm certainly an advocate of expanding that TWI. We got a little reading list, Marcus, that we shared with you that I kind of try to throw on to the folks on the IPPS-A team to, one is a, HR analytics book.
I already tweeted it out the same day you sent it. I tweeted it out. It's gone.
I saw
out there
it
in Cyberland.
I can verify.
I think more importantly, Daryl, are you reading any of those books yet, man? Or have you picked any of those up? I don't know. What do you guys think? Because for me, a lot of that stuff is trying to shape how we're going to execute HR in this system moving forward, and how do we need to build and guide towards it. So that's kind of shaped how we pick those books. Change being a big thing.
And if I jump in, I agree with you. When we first started talking about it, and we spoke, I think it was sometime in November. We had an engagement down here at Fort Jackson, and I went back and found a book, Power of People, which talks a lot about HR analytics, and it's fascinating to read something like that, and it could be any source, any sort of book or article, how it does translate over to what we're trying to do in the Army, where we're trying to go. I think even if you were to look a few years ago, you'd have a hard time making that translation or making that intellectual leap. I don't think that intellectual leap is as wide as it was even just a few years ago. It's a much tighter chasm, so to speak, that's out there from, again, the books and the resources and what we're trying to do here in the Army. So we're moving closer and closer to what the civilian workforce is. Now, are we always going to get there? Not necessarily, because it's not who we are. But again, we're moving closer in that direction and harnessing what they've done out there in the civilian workforce.
Marcus, are you reading anything interesting? I mean, you're the commandant, so you're really busy, but are you reading anything interesting?
I just got Good to Great from Amazon, and I'm gonna take a stab at that. That sounded familiar. I thought I had read it before, but I didn't. So I'm looking forward to taking that from your reading list. So I already actioned. Amazon received.
That's not just my reading list. I think, I mean, the last meeting I had with the chief, he quoted something out of that book.
Well, I don't get to talk to the chief. I mean, that's
come on.
It's your reading list.
I mean, Good to Great is just, I mean, this is the challenge for our Corps, I think, right? It's, hey, we're good. We're doing awesome stuff all over the place, but it's like we got to continue to move towards great, and continue to progress, and then do the things that get us there, in the sense of supporting commanders and soldiers, right?
And I'd also make the plug that we have other resources out there, like our Community 1775 magazine, for instance. We're always looking for articles and pieces by some of our junior people who are probably more savvy than the three of us are on many of these things, on how it can apply to our community. I recall one a year ago or so from a PsyOps Brigade S1 talking about talent management, how she did it. I mean, a tremendous piece that made the cycle, just because it's someone talking about what they do that's outside of the schoolhouse or outside of a reading list. So we're always looking for our community to write and express themselves and put out their thoughts to share.
Yeah, that's a good point, Daryl.
Well, there's a lot of good things. I mean, a lot of it pops up on the social media stuff. I mean, you got sites like AG All the Way, and there's a host of others that, right? The dialogue is just dynamic.
Yes.
In the community right now.
And his junior people, not us that are more long in the tooth and been around the block a few times. It's the younger people that are, again, using social media to create a dialogue about these things, to share best practices and what's worked and what's not worked, so we don't make those same pitfalls. That's tremendous.
Yeah, pretty exciting stuff. We are probably at about the hour mark now, gentlemen. Marcus, I'll kind of pass it to you. If you want to talk a little bit about where the AG Schoolhouse is going, we could probably end it on that, based on your vision of where you're taking us. So
one of the things we're looking at are the KSBs. I'm spending a lot of time on the knowledge, skills, and behaviors. And what should the AG soldier look like out in the future, given what we know and also what we don't know. And I'm trying to get us to think about what we don't know. So if we just kind of go on what we know, we'll just be a better, maybe good to good. But in order to be good to great, we got to kind of glean and interpolate, if you will, to see what we don't know. And because we don't have the R&D mechanisms like the civilian community does, that's what I'm trying to look at. And so I know you have the overarching KSBs, But we're also designing the ones for the proponency to be able to articulate what we want from an AG soldier. We're still looking at the leadership, and so I can't wait to get make more use of some of the TWI opportunities. And we're looking at credentialing, we're looking at certifications, and we're actually doing some of those. And so we will amp the up the ante on that. And then, as we mentioned, focusing on some HR analytics. Daryl mentioned this transformation. He has this. I wish he could talk a little bit about the transformation versus the optimization. But as we look at doctrine, and then I'm also interested in IPPS-A next. So IPPS-A as it is here already. And so if I focus too long on release 3, I'm going to miss release 4 and 5, and then perhaps, hopefully, Greg Johnson, we can get to IPPS-D or IPPS-J, because I think we're onto something. But my goal here is basically to make sure that ones don't get fired. And so every day we're making sure of that as the commandant, but as the chief of the corps, I'm looking out into the future. I'm tracking all of the concepts and to ensure that we can enable commanders in the future for us. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think so. I think the future's bright. Obviously we have a lot to contribute from the Army, from my perspective, and to become great and support commanders and soldiers. Right, we just need to continue to modernize, and then keep working to get there. This last hour has been pretty spectacular. I really appreciate the crosstalk, guys. It really.
Greg, can I get 2 more seconds?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted Daryl to give a foot stomp. We talked about the naysayers, we talked about what we were doing and all that stuff, but there's things that folks can do today. So Daryl, can you talk about some of the updates we just did on one of the things that they can download and go to Blackboard and things that people can do today to be ready when they come either to the schoolhouse or whether they're in the field to be able to implement IPPS-A.
Yeah. So real quick, just some few things, and I wish I could take credit for all these. And Greg, most of these are yours, but I'd encourage the audience to go out there and start interacting with the tool, whether it's through user productivity kits or UPKs. There's a lot of tools, a lot of phenomenal capabilities are out there now to start pushing buttons and understanding what's out there. The other part is military pay, which we didn't really talk about much, but that's a big piece for release 4 in the 2025 timeframe when the AG HR community owns it. We have a DL, a distributed learning tool that's out there now. In fact, it was recently updated about 2 weeks ago on the 1st of February from when we're recording this. That's out there now, and we'd encourage soldiers and leaders to go out there, even those non-AGs, to experience and practice using that tool to better understand what it's going to mean for us and military pay as we move forward in the future.
Yeah, thanks for that, Daryl. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, right? I mean, for us and for you, a lot of those are just linked to our social media sites. So if you go out on our Facebook, on our YouTube, on our S1net, if you're inside the Army, you can get all of this great content, great training opportunities, and just great information. So, if you're doing sergeant's time training or focused on your soldiers and training with them, all that stuff's already out there. Just go grab it, use it. Please use it. And then, I would say the more you prepare now and think about IPPS-A before you do your hardcore IPPS-A training in the middle of the year, the better. The more that you understand, the more that you're thinking about it, all of that, because this train is coming. If you are one of the few naysayers that's out there, I mean, the train's probably going to hit you. And then you'll wake up and go, wow, okay, IPPS-A is live, release 3. So we're excited about it. We're excited to be partnering with you guys. You guys are just doing tremendous work there at the
Hey, Greg,
schoolhouse.
I'm looking at
Marcus.
my naysayer ticker now. Just it's only 3 people left, only 3 naysayers left in the entire total 4. So two, two. It just dropped from 3 to 2.
We're doing good. We're doing good.
Wait,
That's,
one more
that's 'cause they're
second. It's
listening.
one. Only one left. We got to go find that one and become a change agent.
Change is happening. I don't know, my favorite Sam Cooke tune. Change is gonna happen. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming. Really
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank you
it,
for having.
Thanks, Greg.
and we look forward to doing another podcast here soon.
Right soldier, right job, right on time.
24/7, 365.